let me know when you've got that done, Aaron, and then I can start.
It should be recording now.
Cool. Okay, welcome everyone. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start with what's Firestarters. So the reason our team decided to begin Firestarters was because we found, particularly myself and Aaron, anytime that we went to a networking event in Liverpool City Region, a lot of the time, we found that the people who were in the room weren't necessarily either the people we wanted to be in front of, first of all, or we found that they didn't look and feel like us. And we felt that there was a bit of a gap in the networking environment to make a much more inclusive, interesting, and dynamic space. So one of the first things that we really wanted to look at with all of the amazing people in our community and our extended community was thinking about the stuff around the government and building back better. We've always had a bit of a bone of contention with that, and we've talked about this at other events we've hosted with clients of ours previously as well. It implies that the route format was okay, and actually it wasn't for a lot of people. And I think one of the things that's come out most from COVID-19, from discussions we've been having with people in our communities, is actually there's been huge disparity. It's disproportionately affected certain groups over others. So we wanted to get some of the best and brightest and diverse minds in the Liverpool City Region into a virtual room and virtual spaces today, so that we can basically figure out what building back equally looks like together. Because more often than not, the people who are in this room now wouldn't normally be in the room, and that is entirely the point of Firestarters. So just to give you a really quick overview of what Firestarters is, Aaron, if we can please go to that slide, that'd be great. Basically, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what Firestarters is. We're going to go into Emmy's extremely brilliant keynote speech, and we're also going to have a really quick panel discussion with our wonderful panel. Then we're going to go into our breakout rooms, and we're going to have a bit of discussion around some of the stuff we talked about in the panels. And then our wonderful facilitators, who include our panel speakers and some of my team, we're going to take loads of notes, and then we're going to figure out what the next steps look like together. And that's basically what we're going to try and do today. So just to give you a really quick overview of what Firestarters is. If we can go to that slide, please. So basically everything I said there, it's basically networking without the bullshit. We kind of got a bit sick of what the scene looked like, and we wanted to be proactive and change it because that's what we do. Unfortunately, we've had to start this during lockdown, which means that it's been very difficult for us to get in a room with people, but this is our first room that we're in together with people. And essentially we're going to keep doing exciting live events, create really good content out of it, and basically have really wonderful diverse speakers like we've got today. If you could just click again, please, Aaron. And the point of all of that is, like I said at the beginning, it basically wants to enable social change and create really meaningful interactions between purpose-driven businesses. It doesn't have to be businesses, it can be third sector, it can be private and public, whatever it might be. Ultimately, it's trying to act as a force for good in the city region. And basically, it's the business community that we wish that we had when we first started Matchstick Creative 3 years ago. And we felt like we were in a good position now to make that business community come about. So here we are together. So what we're going to do today is Aaron is going to pose some provocative questions to our guest speakers and to our panel speakers. And then we're going to go out into breakout rooms and we're going to talk about it. That's basically what we're going to do. At this point, I feel like, if you just go to the next slide, please, Aaron. Ultimately, the main point of the discussions today is to reduce inequalities and try to come up with a way of building back equal. What that actually looks like, we don't know yet, because we want to consult with all of you and figure out what that might be. We're in the fairly fortunate position that I sit on the Digital and Creative Board for the Liverpool City Region. We've got some other people in the room that work at sort of a combined authority, local council type level. We'd like to use those people and the people who are in the private sectors and those that work in the volunteer and third and charity sector, basically to figure out what that looks like together in a more cohesive way perhaps than we've done previously, and basically act as agents for change to make sure that happens. So that's what we're going to do. At this point, I'm going to introduce our incredible speakers. So our keynote speaker today is Emeka. Emeka, do you just want to say hi to everyone?
Hi everyone, hope you're well.
There he is. Emma is going to be talking through a really interesting talk. I'm not going to do a huge amount of introductions for everyone. I'm just going to do names because I would very much like them to introduce themselves in their own words. But Emma is going to be our amazing keynote speaker. And then on our panel, we have got the absolutely brilliant Chelsea Slater from InnovateHer, who has once again very generously given her time to us. Thank you for that, Chelsea. We've also got the absolutely wonderful Francesca Manca from Underwing. And again, when everyone's talking in the panel discussion bit, we'll let people do a very quick introduction as to who they are, so you can say it in your own words. And we've also got the wonderful Natalie Denny, who is here as well, and she's going to offer a really interesting perspective on everything that we're going to be talking about. That's kind of all I want to say at this point, because I'm by no means the most interesting person in this room today, so I'm going to shut up. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Aaron to speak and handle everything. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, I'll only speak really briefly as well. Only to reiterate what Ruth says and to introduce Emmy and say this is already there's a really good group of people in the room, and I think the group of people that are in here proves why we kind of needed this event and Firestarters in the first place. And as I say, I'll hand over straight to you, Emmy, if you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone, for and in particular, thanks very much to Firestarter for inviting me along to speak today. I work for the Combined Authority on its new race equality programme, and it's fair to say that the whole programme in terms of race equality, the impetus for it was the killing of George Floyd, and all of us, well, I presume most of us have been in some way or other following the trial of Derek Chauvin, and myself personally, I've kind of had half an eye on it without wanting to kind of go into the ins and outs of it and watch it and watch a lot of it, because I was just so afraid of what the verdict might be. So it's just, and fortunately it was guilty. It gives some, I suppose, some joy. Joy's not the word, but something anyway for his family and his friends. But certainly his killing and the impact of COVID-19 was the kind of impetus for the race equality work as far as the city region is concerned. And there were conversations and discussions had within the city region, and really it was about what was our response going to be, and how can we make sure that as a city region, the Combined Authority is a force for good in the area of race equality. So I'll come on to those things in a minute. Next slide, please, Adam. So as I said, the killing of George Floyd and the global pandemic were the impetus for the development of a new approach, or this particular approach, to race equality. I think it's fair to say that since the Equalities Act of 2010, race equality has fallen down the list of organisational priorities. I don't just mean the Combined Authority, to be perfectly honest. I mean of many organisations, that race equality has fallen down the list of organisational priorities when we had a Combined Equalities Act. This isn't new, by the way. I think there's been a whole range of kind of race equality laws, initiatives, events that have all followed the kind of very similar patterns. So in 1981, we had the Scarman Report, which was the report that responded to, first of all, the inner city riots that took place in Brixton, and then incorporated the ones in Liverpool 8 and in other parts of the country that took place. And for a short period of time, race equality was high on the agenda of local authorities. Lots of local authorities in particular and public sector organisations developed race equality units and began to kind of take the lead on a whole range of race equality initiatives. before too long, once all those things were in place, those organisations kind of went, okay, we've done our thing. Let's move on to something else. And once again in 1985, a whole range of inner city riots took place, and a similar thing happened. And in 1999, after the murder of Stephen Lawrence, the Macpherson report came out, which was supposed to bring wholesale changes to public sector organisations. It was the first time that public sector organisations adopted the term institutional racism. And for a lot of us who were around at the time, we were quite hopeful that there was going to be some change, actually. And once again, but before the ink was dry on the Macpherson report, people were already rowing back and trying to water down some of its proposals, and were trying to carry on as business as usual. And so once again, a similar thing happened, whereby the impetus for race equality went and people took their eye off the ball. And so I suppose the point of all of that is giving everyone a little history lesson, is to say that it's all of our responsibilities to ensure that the current impetus around the death, or the murder now, as we know, of George Floyd, the opportunity that this current window allows us has to be kind of maximised. There's lots of organisations within the city region and outside who are actually now looking towards how they can be more, how they can support race equality agendas, how they can diversify their workforces. That window of opportunity is currently open. It won't be open forever unless we get a foot in and keep it ajar. So it's really important that we all kind of have some responsibility for kind of making sure that that happens. Next slide, please, Adam. Okay, so what are we doing? What's the kind of case for race equality within the city region? Well, we did a whole range of conducted a whole range of looking at some data, and conducted some research, available data and research, just to see if we could kind of find what the picture is as far as race equality is concerned. And these are some of the things by no means an exhaustive list that we found, but essentially what this kind of outlines is the kind of life chances of people living in the city region compared to other people. So we've got a whole range of data, and what we found is that if you're from a Black and minority ethnic community, you're twice as likely to be born into poverty. We also found that that Black groups are the least likely of all ethnic groups to meet the expected requirements at standards as far as development is concerned, in say the child development. So they start school less likely to meet the kind of standard development milestones that all children are supposed to develop. And then what happens is that right throughout all the key stages and into and up to key stage 4, where the end of key stage 4, where GCSEs are taken, that many Black groups kind of lag behind their white counterparts. And so what happens is that, you know, for certain groups, for certain Black groups, not all ethnic minority groups, to be honest, but for many of them, or most of them, they lag behind and they under-attain compared to their white counterparts. So, and then moving into adulthood, that begins to have an impact, that begins to kind of have an impact on employment opportunities and employment chances. So what we have is that across the country, we can see that Black groups kind of earn about £1.10 per hour less than average. That on average, even graduates are paid, Black graduates are paid around 10% less than their white counterparts, which is the kind of starkest, is one of the starkest statistics for me, because they're people who qualified, have worked hard, have qualified, have got the qualifications, and yet there is racial disparities in terms of what they earn and so on. Within the city region, black groups are 3 times likely to be stopped and searched by the police. There are other figures there around use of force, around detention under the Mental Health Act as well, which disproportionately highlight how black groups fare within the police and criminal justice system, and twice as likely, the twice as likely not to own their own homes within the city region compared to their white counterparts. I've already mentioned, I won't dwell on the figures for COVID-19. I mentioned them earlier. And overall, what it means is that there's just, in terms of life satisfaction for black groups, there's just lower levels of satisfaction for black groups compared to their white counterparts. Next slide, please, Aaron. So that's kind of what we found. That's kind of part of, you just missed one out. Just go back one. Yeah, thanks. That's kind of part of the picture. In terms of employment, this is some figures that across the city, in terms of the combined authority who I work for, these are figures based on last year's figures. It's pretty much the same. That we have just shy of 1,000 employees, and we have overall, and we have 22 employees, and that represents kind of 2.3% of the workforce. So what we've seen in terms of the population across the city region is that of black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups, that covers 6% of the total city region population. That's 12% in Liverpool. So that's kind of 1 in 8. So that represents, I mean, the 6% might not seem a lot, but it's roughly the population of Birkenhead or Southport. So that's kind of the kind of demographics that we're looking at. And as you can see in some of the other local authorities, across the other local authorities, the local authorities in general, there are just over 22,000 employees, and 540 of them from a black, Asian, minority ethnic group. And overall, they represent 2.4% of the workforce. So we've got quite a lot of making up to do as far as representing the population of the city region. Thanks, Adam. Next slide. So, so one of the things we want to do is kind of present this partly as a need to kind of fill a gap. There's a kind of moral case for ensuring that our city is represented and all its communities are represented. Plus, there's a moral case for tackling inequality. But also, I think there's a good social and economic case for doing this as well. What's clear about race inequality within the city region is that it's kind of holding our region back. We know that research tells us that culturally and ethnically diverse teams, where that cultural and ethnic diversity is harnessed, supported, and encouraged, teams are likely to see better than average profits or be more efficient in terms of the work they do. So if we were to close the employment gap, and at the moment, in terms of economic activity between white groups and black and minority ethnic groups, is about a 15% kind of lag in terms of the economic activity. And if we were to close that gap, we'd be able to add an extra 300 million to our economy every single year. So it really is holding our economy back and holding our region back. Imagine that kind of level of income being put back into our economy every single year. So there's an economic and social, as well as social and social case for making sure that we develop a kind of more equal region. Thanks, Adam. So what's that kind of program going to do? Well, what we want to do is kind of tackle systemic injustice and inequality and drive forward positive change for residents and employees, and also critically influence the kind of partners who we work with to do the same. Yep, next slide, please. So there are three kind of key areas of work that the combined authority has as an employer. So what we want to do as an employer is develop a kind of diverse, representative workforce. So we know we've got to diversify our workforce. We want to also increase the number of Black and minority ethnic staff in senior positions. At the moment, we don't have any. And so we've got a target that that we're going to diversify that. That target's kind of going to be reflected across the city region. So that's going to be 6%. And also we want to embed equality and diversity as an integral part of the ethos and culture of the work we do. So we've already begun to develop new ways and new ways in which we're going to do things. So there's much more around the city council, the combined authorities and employer that we want to do. As a commissioner, we do think that this is where we can have most influence, really, or a lot of influence, really. As a combined authority, we deal with great big kind of infrastructural projects. So everyone knows the most, the most common thing that people know the combined authority for is Mersey travel. So some of the things we do is we're at the moment we're developing new stations in Kirby and in the Baltic Triangle. They're going to come on board soon, and we're developing kind of hydrogen buses as well. We also do kind of big green things, but transport infrastructure things, infrastructure initiatives as well. So there are lots of things that we do, and we commission multi-million-pound kind of infrastructure developments as well. We think that by utilising our role as a commissioner, we can have massive influence into kind of two areas. First of all, by ensuring the people who we commission in our supply chain are employing a diverse workforce and are taking steps to diversify their workforce as well, but also giving opportunities to Black-owned and Black-led businesses to get commissioning opportunities. So we know we've got to not only encourage Black-owned businesses to get the commissioning opportunity, but also do something around gearing them up and supporting them to be in a position where they can win those kind of contracts as well. And then also, as a facilitator, one of the things we've got to do is work much more closely with our community organisations and communities more widely, but also encourage other organisations to do the same as well to promote race equality. Yep, next slide. I'm just conscious of time. So evidence that we've gathered so far has told us a few things. So one of the things that it's told us is that short political funding cycles, such as I mentioned earlier, in relation to that emerge as a consequence of some kind of political crisis, just don't work. You just don't see change in them. Short-term funding and short-term policies as well just do not tackle kind of the systemic and ingrained racial inequality that we see. So that's kind of one thing. Previous delivery around race equality has been fragmented. We've had kind of positive action initiatives, both locally and nationally, that have been introduced for a couple of years and have been fragmented. And one of the things we found is that once those, nobody's kind of evaluated them, nobody's seen what works or anything like that. There's also been nobody to coordinate all of that activity as well. So very much the work around that's been fragmented. So it needs some kind of central coordination, and it needs some kind of co-development to be a key pillar of the approach we need going forward. What do I mean by co-development? is ensuring that those people who are going to benefit from race equality, I'm talking about black groups now and minority ethnic groups, have to be part of the way in which, have to shape the way in which we approach things. So what our proposal is to set up a kind of locally based race equality centre of excellence, or an academy, or a hub, or a unit, or whatever we want to call it, but that's the kind of plan. So yeah, next slide. So we're just at the moment developing our overall business case. So you know, so we're looking to develop that at the moment, and we're trying to identify some kind of funding streams to enable us to do that, and hopefully in the summer we'll get a decision made. In the meantime, it enables us to do some kind of engagement work. Yeah, next slide, please, Adam. And so our kind of next steps are going to be so we're going to go out and do some engagement with communities and with individuals and groups as well. So hopefully many of the people on this, you know, who are attending this meeting, I'll be coming back to kind of ask your opinion about about a few issues. We want to develop a kind of race equality centre of excellence. We want that to be something that the city region is going to be proud of, and something that people outside the city region look at as a kind of model of good practice. We want it to be, we know that it's got to be well resourced. We know that we can't have, we know that substantial amounts of resources need to kind of go into it, not just in terms of funding, but in terms of finance, but in terms of people who've got the expertise to go out and support organisations, businesses, and companies to make the necessary changes. So one of the things, so we're going to ask a series of questions around what a centre of excellence looks like, what's it going to actually do, what's it going to actually do, and what its guiding principles should be, and very importantly, well, the two bottom ones I think are also very equally important. What its guiding principles are going to be, and how it's going to be, how can it be made accountable as well, to ensure that what it's claiming to do, it does, and to make sure that it addresses the kind of serious levels of inequality that exist in our area. So so that's kind of going to be my next phase that I'm going to do. I'd really welcome everybody's kind of input into how we move forward in the next kind of few months and years. Thanks very much. Hope it generated some thought and discussion.
Yeah, certainly for me it did anyway. That was really good. Thanks for that, Emmy. Yeah, I think I'm just conscious of time myself now. I think we had 10 minutes scheduled for a Q&A before the panel discussion. So I think we'll just get straight into that now with you, Emmy.
Great.
If anybody's got any questions, can you either put them in the chat or just pop off mute and ask them out loud? I'll start, to be fair. So this race equality hub centre of excellence type thing, Emmy, who is that for? So is it for like
good question.
Yeah,
good question. The idea of it is to have a central coordinated place within the region that drives race equality. That the role of it is to drive kind of race equality and challenge inequality. So it'll be working. So there's a couple of kind of key things that we want to do. It's really going to be focused around employment and skills. That's that kind of thing that we want to. That's the real going to be the real focus of it. So what that means is we want our young people to kind of, one of the things we know is that in terms of apprentice opportunities, some of our young people aren't getting the range of apprentice, some of the high quality, high caliber apprenticeship opportunities that are available. We want to change that. We also want to ensure that there's a good, high quality Black business infrastructure in the city. So in other words, we want more Black businesses, not just to be established, but to grow and to be supported and enable them to grow. So we're looking at making sure there's good advice and support for Black business to enable them to do that, but also perhaps have access to pots of funding that they can have in terms of grants or loans to enable them to grow their businesses, and also to support businesses, small businesses, large businesses who want to diversify their workforces as well. But also have a real focus on leadership, and that takes and what I mean by leadership is by certainly supporting our leadership to be more diverse. So encouraging and supporting Black groups to get into positions of leadership and influence, so that they can be key decision makers as well. But also ensuring that our existing white leaders can be allies and drivers for change, so that they can talk articulately about race equality, but also drive race equality across the region as well, or within their organizations as well. So that's how we see it in a broad nutshell. But obviously we want that to be open to other people's perspectives to be able to really shape that as well.
How long have you got in post, Emmy?
Sorry, what's that? How
long have you got in post?
It's a good question, Earl. I've only got a year at the moment, but the plan such as it is, we've got a declaration of intent, and that's a 5-year program. So our declaration of intent is going to be for 5 years initially. And they're just around targets. But the Centre of Excellence, what we're looking at is to establish that within the next, year, 18 months or thereabouts. But for that to be self-sustaining in the longer term. So if the idea is to get seed funding, but also to identify ways for that to be self-sustaining, so that it's not a 2 or 3 year wonder, that it goes on till one day we can all go home, because race equality will be a reality, and we can all go home and do something different.
Phil Carvel, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, so firstly, just a quick comment. I really like that breakdown you had of employer, commissioner, and facilitator. I thought that was really insightful. The question goes more to accountability. So you mentioned some of the statistics earlier, but have you thought about what metrics the Centre of Excellence might be looking at? So you've got that, accountability, but also so people can track as to maybe where some of the processes or problems may be to help them move forward, going forward, either in that commissioner, supplier, facilitator role.
That's a really good question, actually, Phil. We haven't as yet thought too much about the metrics that you're talking about. And what I would say is that actually one of the things that we know we have to do is that we want that Centre of Excellence to be a centre where we can get good quality data on the city region, but also contextualize it with the Northwest, nationally and internationally if needs be. We also want it to be a centre where where there's good, high quality monitoring and evaluation of all the work that we do, so that we can track it, so that we can find out what works, so that eventually, if new initiatives or new challenges come to us, that we've got the data, and we've got the data, the research, and models of good practice that enable us to move very quickly and agilely into spaces with tried and tested frameworks to enable us to tackle any new or emerging issues in a way that we feel confident that we can move forward and address them based on things that we've done in the past and a good evidence base. So we haven't got that clearly, but it's certainly one of the things that we're really keen that this unit or academy is going to do, or centre is going to do.
We'll just do one more question before we go on to the panel, just because I'm conscious of we're quite far behind on time. Ben Denver, do you want to ask a question? Seeing your hand go.
Yeah. Sorry to drag this out a little. I wanted to just ask about what sort of organisations and partners would you be looking to kind of connect with, and kind of do you see any challenges in terms of almost incentivising that and getting people on board with kind of feeding in?
At the moment, we're working really closely with the local authorities, particularly because one of the things that we know we want to do is develop high quality, what we've described as gold standard race equality training. Most race equality training that takes place in the private, in the public sector, is very kind of tick boxy. For want of a better word, it's kind of a tick box with maybe a little quiz at the end, and so that people are more kind of focused on passing the quiz rather than thinking about it, about how it impacts on their day-to-day work. What we want to do is kind of develop a high-quality training program that's going to go across all 22,000 employees in local governments across the city region. So we're going to do that, but also we want to be able to tailor that towards other organisations, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector as well. So that's one of the things. So we will be looking for private sector partners to be able to do that as well. One of the things we want to do as well, Ben, is we think that private sector partners will be encouraged to want to diversify their workplaces as well, workforces as well. And so we can support them in terms of how to do that, you know, taking the measures around, you know, how you advertise, how you grow your business, how you diversify your business, the benefits for all of those things. And that's kind of what we want to do as well. But also in terms of the business infrastructure, more generally, we want to encourage people to set up their own businesses, to arrange businesses, whether they're kind of sole traders or social enterprises or whatever kind of structure your business will be. We want to be able to support kind of wide. Sorry about me dog. Apology. I'm going to go on mute just a second while the dog stops kicking off.
It's okay. I was wondering how long it was going to take until a dog interrupted. We've done quite well to get this far. That's fine.
I think after he's finished answering this question now, we'll move into the panel discussions, if that's all right with everybody. Try and pin people.
Sorry about that, folks.
That's okay.
The dog's dead now, so we can carry on. Okay, so yeah, so sorry, where was I? Yeah, hoping to support, you know, Black-led businesses and organisations to grow, to diversify, to be established, if that's the case. And as I said, get access to the right funding at the right times, which will enable them to do that. So we've got what I'd describe as pretty ambitious plans, and I think they need to be ambitious because the level of inequality across the city region is quite stark, and actually to address the kind of problems that we need to that are apparent. I mean, there's a whole range of other problems as well, but I think focusing on employment and skills as far as combined authority is probably the right area to focus on as well. That doesn't mean to say that issues like health or criminal justice or or education aren't important as well. They're critical, particularly education in terms of employment, you know, the interface between that and employment and skills. But I think the employment and skills agenda is really where I think we can have most impact and most influence. And it's where the kind of starkest inequalities probably are in terms of income and jobs and access to a whole range of kind of services and opportunities as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Emmy. Yeah, we're a bit over time, so let's get straight into the panel discussions. That's all right with everybody. So I'm just going to pin people. Bear with me. I think whilst I'm just adding these pins, is it worth the rest of the panel just introducing themselves really briefly? Natalie, do you want to start? That's all right.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I'm going to go to Chelsea first, if that's okay, Chelsea. Would you like to introduce who you are and your organisation? That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Happy to be here, everyone. And that talk, Emma, was so good and very inspiring. I'm Chelsea, and I'm the co-founder of InnovateHer. We're a social enterprise that are on a mission to get girls ready for the tech industry and the tech industry ready for girls. We don't just work with girls, though. We work with non-binary students across the UK as well. And we do two main things, just briefly. We work with young people in schools, teenagers from the age of 13, teaching them about the tech industry and building their confidence. But also we work at the other end of the pipeline on getting the industry more inclusive, because we don't want these young people to get inspired by us and go on that pathway to have a career in tech, and then when they get there it just isn't inclusive for them and they don't retain. So we do a lot of work with organisations within tech to help them become more inclusive, and I'll probably tell you a little bit more about that later, but that's me.
Thank you. Thanks, Chelsea. Everyone go and look at InnovateHer. They do incredible work. The next person, if I could be so bold as to ask, is Natalie. Natalie, would you be okay to introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for that presentation, Emmy. So I am 1/3 of the Goddess Projects, which is an organisation that supports Black women and women of colour to develop and achieve within their communities and create safe, enriching spaces. In order to do that, I'm also a programme manager for the Anti-War Foundation, based in Liverpool, and we provide education, interventions and hate crime services to people who are victims of hate crime, but also for schools and communities across the Liverpool City Region. And I'm also the director of Skywriters, which is a creative education initiative that supports people to develop and grow and achieve sort of through the medium of writing. And so that's me. I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to getting involved and having some of the discussions.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. Natalie wins points for speediest introduction ever. Thank you. I feel like you compacted loads of information into that. That was amazing. Thank you, Natalie. And then the final, but by no means least, is the wonderful Francesca Manca. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Fran, and I run Underwing, where I help female founders and entrepreneurs with special needs create or grow their business. And I've also recently started a community interest company called Shaping Your Future, where I get into schools or I pick up people with special needs that either don't want what to do in their lives, or they want to start a business, and we work around how they can start a business working around their needs. I'm also an enterprise advisor for high schools for people with special needs, and an autism charity trustee. So a lot to do with special needs and autism, and it all sprang because my son has got special needs. So I looked at what's around and I wanted to change it.
Yeah, amazing. I love letting panel speakers introduce themselves, because they always say it better than you ever could. So thank you for that, everyone. They were really wonderful introductions. Also, it's me totally cheating, let's be honest. But thank you, everyone, for doing such good introductions of yourself. Aaron, would you like to go? Do you want to make me host? Do you want to go into questions now? What's easiest for you?
Yeah, yes, both of those things, please.
Go ahead.
Remind me how I make you host.
Just next to my name. If you click on my name in the attendees list, it should be able to say make host.
Okay, cool. Okay. should be the host. I'm not sure if it's just has it just got rid of all my pins?
No.
No? Okay, cool. Okay, yeah, let's get into it then. So yeah, I'll be just like asking questions to the panel, just quite generally. And then we'll do like a separate Q&A for the panel at the end after, well, we'll do like 15 minutes. Okay, the first question I'll open up to you, Emmy, as the keynote. What kind of what are, from your, well, I suppose the combined authorities perspective, what are the kind of challenges facing business owners at the moment for the region?
That's a good question. I think for Black businesses, first of all, there's a kind of number of challenges there, and there are people the people at this meeting who kind of know more about this than I do. But some of the challenges for Black businesses that we found is not having access to the right advice, not having access to the right support, sometimes not being able to grow and develop, and sometimes not having access to kind of the funds and the finances that are available, and not being locked into the kind of range of networks, business networks that enable people to kind of find opportunities and get business opportunities or advice or support as well. So I think that's kind of one of the issues around Black businesses. For other businesses across the city region, I think one of the challenges for them is just around commitment, really. In some cases, it's around a lack of commitment. In other cases, they are committed, but they don't really know what to do. And I think certainly for those organisations who are committed to change, but don't know how to change or what to do about change or diversify their workforce, there's a real need for some kind of advice and support to enable them to achieve that.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Can I come to you next, please, Chelsea? What do you kind of feel that the biggest challenges for employers are around diversity and inclusion? Obviously, I know you work with lots of young people and young girls.
Yeah, and I'll come at it from a tech perspective, because we've got about 26 tech partners that we work with. And I think the main thing that we see is, often or not, it's the younger people or the people in more junior and mid-level positions that aren't necessarily the decision makers that are passionate about this and take it on. So there's a few issues there. One, they take it on in the whole entire strategy or try and implement a diverse and inclusive strategy themselves on top of their job, which isn't good. But also, you know, they haven't got the influence or the budget to make these things happen, and more often not the skills. So and we'll go into like what can they do, but when we see good things happen in an organization, it's because the founder, the CEO, the board are invested in building inclusive workplaces, and they put budget behind it. Now, that is another issue, is that a lot of businesses don't think that they should put money behind this, and it often gets put down the kind of list in terms of investment. And the pandemic really showcased that as well. Luckily, we didn't lose any partners, but a lot of people did in this space. And it's not good enough. I think businesses need to put a lot of investment in this. It's just as important as it is, you know, when you're talking about ops of a business or recruitment or whatever, it all feeds into that. People need, and businesses need, to prioritize diversity and inclusion first. So that's, I think, what I would say is that there needs to be budget, and businesses need to either find that budget. It might be a constraint, but, you know, it's really important. And also, who's leading on this in a business? it shouldn't be the people that are really busy delivering in their job. It should be either someone in a specific role that is trained to lead on D&I, that would be the dream, or a team, or it's someone at that senior board level position that has authority, that is making the decisions, that is leading that. And that's what we found anyway through the work that we do.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think you both touched on points of it being about commitment and figuring out what to commit to and how to commit.
Yeah, and it's a big job, but and we always say, you know, this change is incremental and it's a long-term thing, but actually it needs to happen really fast. So people do need this support, and I put a link to Amatrine Consultancy in the chat, and that's run by an amazing Black woman who was the first Black chief inspector in the police here in Merseyside, and now she's doing consultancy, and we work with her really closely, and she is the person that, you know, the combined authority and others should be working with on this, really. But yeah, businesses do need support, but they need to invest in it and commit to it fast.
Yeah. Can I come to Natalie next, if that's all right? So we've kind of heard of what are the challenges about, like, you know, from the regions level and businesses that are trying to become more diverse. What do you feel the challenges are for actually business owners that are from diverse groups?
I think it's the day-to-day operating in an environment that is not always welcoming. I think you know, Chelsea touched upon it about that people within organisations who tend to take on some of the diversity and inclusion work are usually lower down within the sort of pay grade. But what they have to put up with, as well as trying to do this type of work, is also the day-to-day struggles of operating in quite an institutionally racist society. So I think there's that sort of drain that sort of is attached to that as well. I think in terms of businesses and sort of organisations and the things that they need to that they can look at in terms of the challenges around diversity is that support, about feeling that they aren't banging themselves against the brick wall consistently, about funding. So today the Ubeli initiative has published a Busca paper, and it looks about policy and it looks about funding, and it makes 9 recommendations for organisations about how they can, on a sort of political, on a funding commissioning level, provide additional support. And it's all about that transactional stuff, about making it not a business sort of decision, making it more relational to communities that they work with, about an assets-based approach, about approaching people within these communities that they bring something positive to organisations. So I think for me, funding is a massive thing, and also feeling sort of welcomed and valued within the areas that you work in, from both sides of that fence, really, to be able to feel that you have got that link in. You know, and if you look at... Pardon?
Go on, I think that was just someone else's mic picking up on something. Go on.
Oh, right, sorry, I was that confused. I've lost my train of thought now, sorry about that. So yeah, I think there's plenty of barriers, and there's plenty of people within the business area, within the third sector, which is where I sort of originate, that are doing really groundbreaking and excellent work. And I think sometimes there's a sense of isolation that can have an impact on as well. And I think events like this that bring people who have all got that same sort of viewpoint or you know, interest at heart, to create these communities that are beyond your own individual business, because it can be quite lonely out there sometimes when you are trying to do these things, and you are a business of 1 or a business of 3. So for me, I think it's really important that we look at how we can network and create stronger sort of communities, so that when we actually move to address change, we can do it in a collaborative way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like the point you made about kind of support networks and yeah, exactly, like needing stuff like this, because obviously that is exactly why we started Firestarters, because there were so many times when it was so hard to find like a community of like-minded kind of business owners to work with and support each other.
This is it. I think one of the like main things that they said on the report, like one of the 9 actions on the report that was published today, talked about that idea of what I've mentioned earlier, transactional, and looking at more as being relational. So, you know, and one of the things they mentioned about like funding, for example, was about it, instead of it being competitive, it was collaborative, because the way the sort of commissioning is set up, a lot of the time you have really small independent organisations all competing with each other for really small pots of money. So for me, we need to sort of look at how we can support each other and create networks to go for things together. But that isn't always the Black businesses' fault, because they're just trying to apply for things. It needs to be looked at that funding, commission and structural policy level, about the changes that can be made, not just by the individuals who are going for jobs or starting businesses. There needs to be that partnership between both ways, because otherwise we're going to continue, as Emmy mentioned before, about these short-term commitments, you know, that don't link into the McPherson report, that don't link into any other report, that are saying the same thing over and over again in the last 30 years, but nothing changes. So for me, it's about us learning from the past and putting that into actual practice, and not us thinking, well, we have a short-term commitment to this. It needs to go above and beyond. And then when we do come to the end of something, we review and then we make better, you know, to put in simplistic terms. There needs to be some sort of linear handover going on, because I think what happens a lot is we just end up going back to the start, and then very little progress ends up being made, and then people get tired. So we want to put our collective effort together to have a commitment to the long term.
Yeah, agreed. Chelsea, you've got your hand up.
No, I'm just clapping because I thought that was brilliant.
Right. Fran, can I come to you next, please?
Absolutely. Well, I agree with everything that has been said, and it's a big 360-degree job, and we have to look at it from all perspectives. And as Ruth was saying in the comments, equality is not just about race or just about gender, it's about everything. And I think the only 2 things I can add is that we need to take a step back, and we need to work on awareness first, so that people are aware that these things exist, because they really are not. If you're not, and I am the first one, I raise my hand, if my son didn't have special needs, I wouldn't know anything about having special needs or having autism or his specific condition, and or if I didn't have friends who had gone through sex change, I didn't know anything. I wouldn't know anything, because there is no awareness, no information, nothing about anything that is not standard. And on the other hand, there needs to be a big empowerment work, because I speak from my point of view, and one of the things I bang my head against the most is the fact that people say, but if my son starts a business, I'm going to lose carers allowance, which is what, £100 a week? I don't know, but it's like in that region. And this is why teenagers are not even allowed to think they could effectively start a business, even if they have special needs or if they are different than the majority. And so I would say awareness, but also empowerment. These 2 things need to come together to the rest of things that have been said till now.
Yeah, that was really good as well. Can I stick with you, Fran? And
yeah,
just off, yeah. Like we're, I think we're all like all the guests on the panel are, you know, from organisations that are trying to do something or trying to do it in an inclusive way. What changes do you feel like would have to be made in the city or the region to make success for your organisation easier?
I think, well, the keynote presentation was very, very clear, and I think that doesn't just involve the Black people, it involves any minority and any diversity, and that is the change that needs to happen. We need to show, first of all, the world that being a part of a minority or a diverse kind of, I don't know, being not normal, let's say like that, not what is considered shiny and normal, doesn't mean you can't work, you can't run a business, you can't do things. And another thing was what Natalie was saying is collaboration. We need to drop this thing about competition. There is enough money in the world for everyone and enough clients in the world for everyone. And there is enough opportunities in the world for everyone. But we just need to understand that unless we work together, some barriers will not come down. I can bang my head against the problems I see every day till I die, but I am just one. And these problems are made by centuries of way of thinking and millions of people. And I cannot solve them by myself. So definitely one of the first things is like dropping this competition thing and working all together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can I ask Natalie the same question? What changes would you need to see to make success for your organization easier?
I think transparency. I think, echoing what Francesca said, it is about working together, about getting that support. I know that there's like a new business hub for Black businesses set up, the Neo Hub, which is like recently set up. So hoping that organisations like that can really be able to reach out and support others in their journey. Because, if we look at the statistics that Emmy presented before in terms of business, in terms of life chances, we definitely need to be supporting and more proactive with some of the support measures that we put in place for businesses. I think definitely, it being really aware about what support is available within the region, because I think sometimes I'll just come across stuff on Twitter or through my own reading that might have been, as someone in the comments has put, that we've got a group in Liverpool or Equalities group called FASJAB, which I've never heard before. And in the type of work that I do, that sort of stuff. And it might be because it's in the acronym that I've not heard before, but I think it's really important for us is there a place where a lot of these organisations, there's a directory where we can go, where we can get that information? Is the information there available for us to put our hands on? Are we able to create groups that we feel confident in? I think events like this are really good, as I mentioned earlier, because the network can bring people together. But yeah, I just would reiterate the point that I made before about it being collaborative and about us being able to share and support each other and understand that someone's success isn't at your detriment, and that we have to all sort of be supported. And what I would like is a lot of support from businesses that aren't categorized as minority or Black led or anything like that, because the work I do with the Anthony Walker Foundation, our current campaign is called Speak Out, Stop Hate, and we talk about this bystander approach and about how racism, ableism, any of these sort of elements of hate crime are not the victim's responsibility, entirely, then, well, not the victim's responsibility at all. But if we're putting it in a business perspective, I can work hard and try and get on the ladder and go to university and do everything that I need to try and elevate myself. But does that elevate my community? I think representation isn't everything. I think we need to be really honest and open about that, about how we need to be opening doors, but we also need to be, kicking walls in. And we need the help of our, our allies, our other businesses and organisations, so that these things become everyone's responsibility.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the time, and I'm just thinking we'll have a bit of a change of plan. We were going to do breakout rooms, but as there's only 20 minutes left, I think it's best if we just open questions up to the panel. So if anyone's got questions you want to ask, or for anyone specific, you can either put your hand up, unmute, or just stick it in the chat again.
I've got a question.
Go on, Ben.
And I don't know if I'm asking too much here, but this is based on Chelsea's comment before about this is like a long process, and I feel like it can be a lot of talking, and I like to be the person that take action. So from each of you, if there's one thing, no matter how big or small there is, that businesses can do either tomorrow or this week just to get the ball rolling, what would that be?
Should I go first?
Yeah.
I want to give you 3 quick things because I wrote these down. So I think what I say to organisations is that haven't like started on this at all would be capture your data. So like analyse exactly who is in your organisation now, see where the gaps are, see who you can get to support you in terms of like getting more diverse and inclusive or diverse people in the business, and then having a more inclusive workplace. Ask or assign budget. That's like a critical first step that you would need as well. And then thirdly, which I think is the most important thing that anyone can do at the minute, is get unconscious bias training. I think every single person in an organisation, particularly managers, particularly hiring managers, the board and the CEO, you all need unconscious bias training, because a lot of this stuff they're not aware of. So I think if we're rolling that out within the city region, or whether organisations basically need to make it mandatory, because it's just so important. I think that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and I think the thing that Emmy was saying in his keynote at the beginning, when he was just like, white leaders need to feel like they can speak up about this stuff and they can be agents for change to make sure that it all feels more diverse for all the other types of people in the world. Unconscious bias training is one of the first easy steps you could take towards that. We have no idea what our biases are. Even when you're very self-aware, you still don't really know why you're making some of the decisions you're making, or you're holding prejudices or thoughts about people. So I think that's really excellent, actionable advice. Also, what Ben said there about, I'm a big fan of action over talking. I couldn't agree with you more, Ben. And that's one of the main reasons we've started Firestarters. So one of the things we're going to do after this discussion is we're going to basically come back to everyone who's taken part and be like, what does the action look like? What's our version of a helpful protest? That's what we're thinking of doing next. So thank you for saying that. Action is very important. More act, less chat, as our friend Michelle Charters would say. Cool. Who else has got a question? That was a great question. Anyone else?
Just the unbiased training, have you got any like recommendations of organisations?
The one that I'd put in the chat before, Amatrine, Irene delivers it and it's really good. And Gunan said it's not the only thing that organisations need to do, and that's definitely true. I think it's just a good start. And also I'm going to put a book in the chat called Demanding More that I've just read, and it's got it's quite an actionable kind of practical book that everyone could read. And there's like, it starts with a privilege walk. I don't know whether anyone's done that, but as a white woman working in this space, I realised that I'm very privileged, and I can use that to highlight people that aren't so privileged, and use my community as InnovateHer to help those that aren't as privileged as me. And that book alone has made me realise that, but also that book will help you assess your organisation and take some actionable steps. I'm going to put it in the chat now because it's so good. I should be on commission for putting this book out there, because everyone I talk to about it buys it as well. So I hope it is a good recommendation. But anyway, I'll put it in.
I'll let you know if it is, Chelsea. I'll come back to you.
Could I just add to that? Is that all right, Ruth? Yeah. So I think the point that Gunan's made about it doesn't work. Alone doesn't work. I agree. I think for anything like this, it's not a single sort of remedy. There needs to be a holistic approach. So I always find that the training, because my background in education and training, so the stuff that we deliver always has to be attached to an action plan. So some of the stuff that we're delivering as part of the Anti-Walker Foundation and also as part of the Goddess projects is a training that has pledges, that has workbooks to work through, that has reams and reams of additional reading and stuff that people can do within their organisations. And people work through that in order to look at creating policy and support, as well as looking at about how they make it actionable, and how they actually make it follow through, how they make it measurable, making it SMART, basically, if the acronym that you use. So we deliver that within the Goddess projects at the minute, which is the one we've got at currently is Ally 101, an anti-racist introduction, and the feedback we've got from that is it's quite a full sort of introduction, because what it does is it puts the emphasis back on individuals rather than it being you've been on this training and then you've got a tick box, so now you can dwindle off into the sunset because you've done this training. And I think we have a lot of that, and what I would like to see in some of these sorts of things is a joined up approach, that it isn't just a tick box exercise, it's linked to a policy. It's linked to a review of what you're doing within your workplace. It's then linked to a review of who is actually in your workplace and what are your recruitment processes and practices like, how do your staff feel. So there's loads of different elements that need to be looked at in relation to that, and I feel that providing that sort of menu of different ways to interact in the long term ends up being more successful, because there's an investment, not just financially but with time. My last role was working as community engagement, and we looked about how the importance of, and I think that links to what Chelsea said before about how you need to get sort of board approval and CEO approval, and we need to have it at every level, because if it's getting pushed by a few odd people within the organisation, then it's a danger of becoming something that just filed away as a certificate in your cupboard, or put up on the wall to say. So for me, I would like to see it towards actual measurable, real change, that we can actually sit there and go, okay, for us to go from A to B, how do we do this? Let's reflect on the type of organisation we are and be honest about that, and let's look at what the steps that we have to do to go next. So I think there needs to be a bit of a menu and a platform in relation to that.
Anyone else got any other questions? That sparked some great debate. If anyone wants to pull it out of the bag like those last two questions have, do feel free. Anyone else got anything they'd like to say?
Can I just add to that in terms of businesses? I think there's kind of three things. I think 2 for businesses and 3 for kind of other organisations. But certainly senior leader commitment is critical for any organisation if they're going to do this. So that your senior leaders have to be committed to it and drive the kind of change. They might assign somebody else to do it, but they have to be the drivers of the change, and that way change is more likely to be wholesale and more likely to be substantial and long term. Secondly, the other issue is about accountability, about making sure that for race equality that it's accountable, thinking about who has oversight of your plans, who has oversight, who's scrutinising your plans, making sure that they're meeting the needs, that you're setting targets and that those targets are appropriate, and what happens if those targets aren't met. They're kind of some of the key things. And also the final thing, and it might not necessarily apply to businesses, but it might well do, is always kind of political pressure, either internally or externally or both. If you've got some kind of group or organisations who are lobbying and demanding change as well, that's always a kind of good impetus for making sure that change will happen.
Just on that point, Emmy, I noticed in your presentation before, like a lot of the reforms and the acts were after riots or murders or something like that. Do you think, I'm not saying we should Firestarters should start a riot, but do you think there is like that need for something drastic before any change can happen?
Historically, riots are always a good catalyst for change. They're always a good catalyst for change. The problem with them is that change is never sustained, and it's kind of always piecemeal, because what governments tend to do is very quickly they'll set up some kind of public inquiry, and that public inquiry is designed to take the steam out of any kind of initiative. So what it does is, typically it won't be paused for 2 or 3 years when that initial kind of, the initial spark or the initial catalyst is long gone and out of a lot of people's memories. And and quite often the people who are responsible for whatever it was that went wrong in the first place have died or retired or have moved on to other organisations, have moved on. So while they're good for an initial catalyst, they're not good in terms of, you know, sustaining kind of change. The, you know, organisations and systems are good at allowing that to be an opportunity to let off some steam, and then just enables things to be, you know, to go back to normal. So, yeah.
I think built on that point about are riots a good catalyst for change? Emmy's 100% right. Obviously, it produces a short-term response. Really, the question should be, why on earth are we having to riot to get people to listen?
Well,
the problem is, why are we getting to the point of broken or desperation for anything to be done? It should be this ongoing discussion, this ongoing commitment. And I think one of the main things that's come out for me from this discussion is you need buy-in from the top, and it needs to be a sustained effort. I'm thinking of this from quite a private sector point of view because I run my own company. We've got EDI quite visibly across every area of our company, which is why we started Firestarters. This is part of what we decided would be our positive action. But also, I saw something on Twitter the other day where someone was saying, why isn't the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Officer the CEO? It should be in every organisation. That's who that role should, that's who that accountability sits with. The point we were talking about to do with accountability, there needs to be someone who helps them facilitate that, but ultimately they're responsible. Me as the founder of my company, I'm responsible for us having diverse representation. It is my job. It's part of your job. It's an essential part of your job. So I think it's interesting to see that coming out from other people as well. We've still got 7 minutes here. Does anyone else have any other thoughts they'd like to add? Equally, if you don't want to speak in front of everyone, feel free to put something in the chat and I can ask on your behalf. Feel free. We're quite happy to.
I just wanted to add to what you two just said. And I think that's the process that we're seeing in the world all the time. And this is why I linked back to awareness, because if you think about what's happening now with that Netflix documentary about fish, now no one is eating fish anymore. And I just think you're going to last 3 weeks and then you're going to go out and eat fish again, because this is what happens, isn't it? Because they watched the documentary and we kind of all know that all the fish we see in the supermarket can't be sustainably sourced. There is too much, and there is too much wastage, and but we don't point our attention to it till something happens. And in this case, the something is that a lot of people were home and have watched the documentary, and then now they're all tired and scared and crying about the fish. But the reality is true. But the reality is, it's about that doesn't generate the conviction you need to really stop eating fish forever. And in the same way, as they were saying, the bias training is not going to generate the conviction you need unless you really put your heart into it. And you need accountability people, you need steps, you need a path to remind you that you need to go back there. We all need it. And I mean, we can apply this to everything, like running our own business or whatever else we do, going to the gym, sticking to a diet. The moment we lose the drive, it's all gone, isn't it? The change is gone, and you just think, I'm going to have a pint because I care more about the pint than about being thin, which is what happens to me.
Yeah, I think the idea of sustained change is hard because people are lazy and it's really hard to keep up good habits, which is why good habits are so easily dropped. And that point about the fish documentary, the point about protest, there's always going to be a peak in interest, big public discourse, and then it's going to drop off because everyone's suddenly wondering about what's going on in Prince Philip. Do we really care? I don't think we do. But, there's going to be some other thing that's going to draw our attention towards it. And that drops off the public discourse and it drops off the front of your mind, which is why it's important to have constant debate and constant challenges to how you're dealing with those things.
Would I interject there, Ms. Ruth? I completely agree, and I'm just looking at some of the discussions in the chat, and I don't know if it was Chelsea or someone said above. For me, I think a lot of the time when we approach equality and diversity across our region or across the world, it's from a position of deficit. Like for me, Black people and people from minoritized groups are some of the most inventive, amazing, fantastic people that we should want in our organisations. And I think for me, it's so important that we approach it from an asset-based approach, that we go to communities. And this is some of the conversations that I have with businesses and sort of other backgrounds sometimes about how it isn't that you're this amazing business that's going to come here and change these poor Black people's lives. You are a business that is in our community. So you have a responsibility to be putting into that community because we put into your business for whatever that is. So I think it's so important for us to talk about it in an asset-based approach, that we've got amazing people right across our region who are excellent, who can really bring something fantastic and wonderful to your organisation. So what are you going to do about getting them in there? You are missing out. So sometimes I think reframing some of the way we talk about these things is really important. Because even like I don't say ethnic minorities, I say minoritized groups, because for me that's important, that because minority for me also seems to be at a point of deficit, and I think language is really powerful, and it's a little part of what we do, but I think overall it contributes to how we view people within our region. The inventiveness of some of the Black women that we support as part of the Goddess projects, every time I see them, it just completely takes me breath away. The things that they come up with, the things that they can link into, the sort of depth and insight that they have. And I'm a very, very proud Black woman. You know, I'm a proud Black disabled woman, and I'm partially deaf. I wear hearing aids and I talk about it quite often. And I think for me, I feel that in organisations, they should be lucky to have some of these staff that they do have. So for them, it needs to be investment and growth and diversity about all the positive things that can come along with your organisation, rather than it being something that's placed upon you as drudgery, as a negativity. So I just wanted to get that in there, because I think it's always really important to reframe the discussion sometimes as well.
Definitely. And the point about language being important is important. Language is incredibly important. I'm a writer by trade, so it's very important to me. I'm going to go to Tracy here. I'm aware of the time. Tracy's got her hand up, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to Aaron for some final thoughts, and we will finish up because people want their food at the last rays of sun. Tracy, what would you like to say? Go on.
Yeah, we all want our tea, don't we?
I know.
It's just been fascinating listening to everybody, and I suppose partly I just feel incredibly frustrated that that on many levels we are having to have these conversations. And yet I see I've worked in local government for 20 years, and I've run a business now for 10 years or a bit more. And it's been fascinating for me to see the difference of being kind of almost like on the inside in local authorities, doing some of the work that Emmy is now brilliantly doing. And then it does feel like on the outside, when you run a small business, there's this huge disconnect, actually. And there's a huge amount of exclusivity around who gets to be in conversations and who doesn't. And the people in the conversations are usually in there for some sort of positional power that they hold. They're the head of this. They're the, I don't know, they run Merseyrail. They're not picking on them. Just came to mind. The growth, this hub thing. And, all these people who've got all these positional, privileged positions, actually. And yeah, and there's very, very little kind of access. So, and I've experienced that, not in the way a lot of people have spoken here, but as a woman, we were calling out 4 years ago a lot of stuff around the Northern Powerhouse, which we don't hear about anymore. Well, the Northern Powerhouse was basically a bunch of white men telling us what the North needed. And they kept forgetting to invite the women into the room. And we called it out and we kept calling it out, and they actually got scared of us in the end, and we keep on doing it. It's called the People's Powerhouse. And I think like now is a time when we need to adopt some of those, I want to say tactics, but kind of calling it out for what it is. And you know, so I think, you know, I get asked to speak on panels, and I know it's because they need a woman to add a thing, you know, and I'm sure a lot of other people here get asked to do things for similar kinds of reasons. And we need to start calling things out and say, no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I'm not here to make the numbers. We're here because we're making a contribution. We're and important in that respect, whether as business owners or business, you know, being part of businesses in the region. And I just think it's poor that local authority leaders and all the rest of it, which I was then a part of, are still, you know, pretty much all white, all men until recently in Wirral, you know, and we just kind of, I don't know, I just think we need to get into that kind of thing. And actually businesses do have power, and our voices can be powerful. And it's a really good start of something that could be, you know, we need to be more gobby.
Yes, I agree. I love the word gobby. That's a good word to end on there.
I said that, I'll shut up.
Thank you for your thoughts. I'm really aware of the time, and I'm very thankful for everyone giving us this hour and a half for us to do this. I'm going to hand back to Aaron for final thoughts, and we will say goodbye to everyone. So thank you, everyone. Back to you, Aaron.
Yeah, final thoughts is just thanks everybody for coming. I think like this event topic has been perfect considering like the current climate, or for anyone who's just read that government report that's been put out. It feels like this is the right time to be having this conversation. And like I'm as well as being on as well as doing this with Firestarters, I'm also on the Liverpool City Council's Race Equality Task Force. So I have these kind of conversations quite often, and I'm really involved in like this agenda generally. But I feel like today's conversation has been really productive. Like I've learned so much, and I think like if we had another 2 hours, I think I'd probably continue learning for the rest of the 2 hours, because it still feels like there's an awful lot to say. But I think from here, what we'll do, we've recorded the event, so we'll share the recording with you all so you can review it or refer back to it if you need to. And we'll spend some time like breaking down the findings, and we'll feed that back to you as insights as well. So thank you all for coming. I hope you've all enjoyed it. If anyone's got any questions or anything else, feel free to ask or drop me an email or whatever else. Is that okay for everyone? All right. Good to see you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's so nice seeing you. Bye.
Well done, guys. Brilliant.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks for your contributions. Thank you, Emmy.
El, are you there? He would have walked away from his phone and not left the event. Oh, there he is. El used to coach me football when I was like 12 to 15.
Ah, that's nice. Have we stopped recording?
I